Okay, well, let's talk some Stephen King, right?
Yeah.
My name is Kyle Mitchell. I am the second director for the media track and helping out with the lit art comics track as well here at Monsterama. And this is the Cujo panel, and I'm very excited to talk to you today about this panel.
Yeah.
A full room here.
Very full.
It's you.
Save your applause for the end.
You hear? Yes, in the back, please sit down. Please sit down. We joke, and no one showed up to this panel. They must have gotten scared.
Well, rabies is terrifying. There's a lot of contagious disease discussion in Cujo, so maybe it's like hitting on that terror zeitgeist.
It's too real.
No.
But we're gonna have this discussion anyway.
We're gonna have the brave discussion that people won't want to have.
That's right.
Yes.
And maybe save a life.
Exactly.
So
get your rabies vaccinations.
You heard it here, folks. So before we get into it, introduce yourself to.
Oh yes, my name is Kelly Frank. I am a horror artist and author. I also write film reviews. I used to write them for Dead, Buried, and Back until they went out of business very abruptly. And let's see, and I used to be a college English professor, and so I'm used to breaking down film. That was one of the things I enjoyed doing, is making students watch creepy horror films and analyze them, because there's not enough horror in people's lives. So.
No, there's not. And we're going to delve into some of my favorite topics around horror in this panel. I did not, so this is the first time I've read Stephen King's Cujo, was for this panel.
Oh, well, that's awesome.
And I read maybe 15 or 12 to 15 of Stephen King's novels before, and also a lot of his short stories. But I had just never gotten across to reading Cujo.
I'm going to be different, because I read this book. I begged to read this book. My mother had a copy of this book sitting on the floor in her bathroom. She read all of her books in the bathroom.
Nice.
So
a woman after my own heart.
She read It, and I begged to read that. She thought that would be too scary. So I had to read a bunch of Stephen King short stories, read Skeleton Crew and stuff like that before I was allowed to read Cujo, because she thought that would be a better intro than It. So I read this when I was probably like 9 years old.
Wow.
So this is like I have a great love for this book. I had to go out and find a first edition copy of it, because
Awesome.
I love this book so much. So.
Wow, that's incredible.
So
9
we're
years
gonna
old.
come from different.
I love it. No, I love this. And so, well, I'll just ask first off. At 9 years old, when you read it the first time, were you really scared?
No, I thought it was bad.
What was your experience?
I was a creepy child. I just really enjoyed it. I liked I have a funny story if you're here.
Yes, please.
So I basically what I did was, as a child, I was reading a whole lot. We didn't have YA as much back in the 80s. So I'm a 79 baby, so we didn't have the YA genre. And so I kind of missed that. So I read a lot of those kind of other types adult more books, because it was little kids or adults. There wasn't an in between. So basically I read it, and then I would tell my siblings about it, because that's how they learned about these things. So we invented a game that was basically tag but intense, where it was called Cujo. And in Cujo the game, one of you had rabies and would growl and bark and chase the other person around, whether you were in a pool or on a trampoline. And if the other person got touched, then they got rabies. And the goal was to be the last person standing.
Wow.
So that was, we were like children playing a game with rabies.
Oh my
It's
goodness.
kind of intense, actually. When you think about that.
No. If Stephen King heard that story, I think he'd be honored.
It was pretty irritating. Nowadays it would be
life-imitating
zombies, but it was rabies at the time.
Wow.
So yeah.
King capitalized on that kind of scare, just like we go through those phases, right? The satanic panic.
Yeah.
And then real health disasters. Right now we're having to do this panel wearing masks.
Yeah.
And so there was a real scare about rabies. And I mean, I remember growing up, I'm a 77 baby.
Okay, so we're close.
Yes, so, and I remember that about, my mom warning us about playing with the neighborhood dogs, the strays, if you don't know the dog.
Yeah, or if a dog looks like it's behaving strangely, or if a squirrel or any kind of animal you see is behaving strangely, like get away from it as fast as you can, that kind of thing. Yeah, so I grew up in like, it was suburbs, but it was like woodsy suburbs.
Right.
So we had a lot of rabies scares in that area. So yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, it is, but I love that you so early on. I mean, we played like hunter and prey, and instead of hide and seek, and as me and my buddies, we were kind of more influenced just by just general military stuff and. Probably some G.I. Joe and that kind of thing. But to read, I didn't really properly read adult, fiction, especially horror, until my late teens, probably. So
we were like a bunch of like young like girls just playing like who can outrun the rabid dog the fastest. So.
I love it.
Yeah.
Please tweet Stephen King that. Okay, so this novel takes place in Castle Rock, Maine, like much of his other novels and stories, universe, and so forth.
I think this is one of the earliest versions.
Yeah, it would be.
Rock.
Yeah.
So so this is foundational in lots of ways.
But more straightforward. So we have some moments of the unexplained and unexplainable.
Yes.
What we come to expect from Stephen King novels oftentimes, right? The Dark Tower and The Shining, and there are some glimpses of that in this.
Yes.
But then, is this, so I'll ask you, is this to you a supernatural novel, or is it really more of we're here at Monsterama, is it kind of a monster story of this?
I like to think of Cujo as kind of like a monster story in the sense of like, not quite like Creature of the Black Lagoon, but the same kind of idea, like the monster that can't help be a monster and is an actual pain. Wolfman, kind of like Wolfman. Where he's in pain, he wants someone to end the pain that he's feeling, but he also like doesn't understand what's happening to him. We understand it. And I think this is actually a really, like, this book is really good for like teaching like how rabies feels from the inside. You know what I mean? Like, and I think that like there's supernatural elements to it, but I think that a lot of those are kind of in service to like, I don't know, I read Pet Sematary again recently, that's another one I really like. And it has kind of this Greek tragedy kind of feeling about it, like this is an inevitable thing and people trying to do stuff, there's supernatural things trying to stop it, but nothing can stop it because inevitably it's going to happen. And I feel like Cujo kind of has that same kind of like, this is an inevitability, this is what's going to happen, and it's kind of, the dog is just like a hapless victim of fate, kind of like Oedipus or somebody like that, but like, this is his fate and he can't get away from it. I don't know.
I think that's a great observation, and you know what it reminded me of was the birds.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And do you know the story of the bird? Do you know the etymology of the birds? It's very similar to this. So the birds, the novel, was the real life horror that came was from what I've heard, was this red algae that had come in to the coast and in England, I think it was, and these birds that then wound up going to being mad and having some kind of disease. Instead of it killing them, it basically made them crazy.
Yeah.
And they started doing things they wouldn't do. And they didn't know why these birds were, doing airstrikes and dive bombs, and killing themselves, but just flying into buildings and windows and all kinds of stuff. They didn't know why at first until they started going and dissecting them and little birdie autopsies. Yeah. And that's what they found, was it wound up that it was this red algae that didn't normally come.
That is fascinating.
Isn't that interesting?
Yes.
And in a way, so if we believe that Cujo chased a rabbit into a cave and then got bit by a bat in a cave,
yeah.
I mean, do we believe that it really is what happened and he became a rabid dog? And
Well, or is it something like that conspires to get him to behave in certain ways so that things happen? Like, there's a lot of different, like, you can interpret it either way, I think. Like, if you want to go with the supernatural aspect, you can lean into that. I personally like the, you know, this is, you know, bad stuff happens to good people. Cujo's a good dog and bad things happen to him by the end of it. He's the monster that has to be bludgeoned to death. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
that potential for wickedness in everybody at the end, you know, like.
I completely agree, and I've heard people say, I don't think I've heard Stephen King directly say this, but that the real theme of Cujo is don't be afraid of the real life dangers that are out there, you know, which is it's so cool. As I was reading it, it's like so cool to think that this is like Stephen King writing the anti-Stephen King novel.
Yeah, yeah. It's, you know, because when you think of Stephen King, you think of like, you know, Pennywise the Dancing Clown and like stuff like that. But a lot of people don't think of stuff like, you know, The Stand, which has a lot of supernatural elements, but also it's a disease that goes rampant and kills a bunch of people. And that's, you know, I mean, it's easy to laugh about that until we sit where we are now. We're like, well. So, I mean, I kind of feel like that taking something that is very grounded in reality and pushing it to the very limit to see like how far you can take it, you know what I mean? Like, realistically, once they got quiet, Cujo would probably wander off because rabies would affect the creature to make them like go after any noise. So all they need is like a loud bird or something and he'd like run off after that.
Yeah.
But that's not what happens, because it's like they're all like locked in this fated thing. But I like the idea of taking like realism, grounded realism, and then pushing it like as far as you possibly can to see where it goes.
It's almost a perfect storm to have the situation happen the way that it did.
Yeah.
But we hear stories on the news, real life stories all the time, that are just like that, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes they're survival stories, you know, against all odds, crazy circumstances when everyone that could have helped did the exact opposite of their normal nature.
Yes.
Which to me is terrifying, because every chapter you're reading of Cujo, you have another player introduced that you think, oh, that person is now going to be
help or solve things.
Yeah. Oh, well, surely the postman, you know, the mailman is going to deliver the mail there, until you find out, oh no.
Every little thing is conspired to keep people from actually like going to the place. So they're well and truly trapped in this. It reminds, okay, so this is kind of weird, but the first thing I thought of when you were saying that was like that kid that got attacked by an alligator and killed in Disney World. It's that same kind of thing of like the odds of them being in this place in Disney World at this particular time where there happened to be a gator and a person happened to be, you know, the kid happened to be out in the water and this just happened to happen. Like, those are very small odds. Like, Disney tries to maintain like safety and all this stuff. I mean, and even though they had signs up, that just happened to be one spot where a sign was in the place where they noticed it. So it's just like, sometimes that does happen in real life where there's like horrible things that happen because a series of, we just happened not to notice this, and this just happened to happen, and this just happened to be in this right spot. And then it's just horrible things happen, and it makes me think of that kind of.
And sure, right, there are, so, you know, we sometimes like to make ourselves believe that things are connected when they're really not, and it's really just synchronicity.
Yes.
But then there are, I think one of the things that this novel shows and maybe proves is that decisions that we make do have consequences and the ripple effect. Because you said something that made me think of that in the beginning of this as well too. And I don't know if King was being kind of funny in this as well, with the climax being in the car, being trapped in the car, you know, and the old joke, you know, my karma ran over my dogma.
Yeah.
But in a way, isn't this story really kind of about karma and and what, because King does the great psychological torture, self-torture with a lot of his characters.
Oh yeah.
Where they have that self-talk and they just beat themselves up with the guilt and make it even worse.
Oh, this story is all about that. It's just like, because everyone feels bad about all these little different things, and it's all just feeding together to create this big, like, climactic moment at the end. And I do want to talk about the end at some point, because we have to discuss that at some point.
Yeah.
Especially compared to the movie.
Right. So if you've never, for our guests at home, if you've never read the book but you've seen the movie, you need to read the book, because there's some big differences, and one of the major is the end.
Yes.
And there will be spoilers ahead, and we will be doing some of that. And so yes, we definitely will be covering that. I felt like with this, part of what added to the tension throughout was the main characters. You have the wife and mother having an affair, and then there's the consequences of the fallout from that with her husband. Yeah. And then the man that she had the affair with being a total dick and just coming in and then ruining it. So even though she leaves a note of where they're going, she and her son are going, he then comes in the house and decides to cause a bunch of trouble and tear up the place and erase that, smudge that out. Yeah. Right? So that then even when her husband comes home,
he has no idea what's happened. And then you also have, like, why her car is able to be there for so long without anyone noticing. And it's like, you know, when you find out that, well, the mechanic was actually abusive towards his wife, and she's trying to get her and her child out, and all that tension of her trying to escape is really good. And that moment when, like, you know, you realize that Cujo's being left behind and no one is going to be taking care of him, and it's like the consequence, because I don't know, I grew up in like a country kind of area where people would be like, oh, well, I don't feel like having this dog, I'll just let this dog go. Sure. You know what I mean? Or I don't feel like having this cat, I'll just leave this cat behind or whatever. And it's that same kind of thing. It's like, this creature is dependent on you to take care of them. They haven't taken care of this dog in terms of taking it to the vet, having it get its rabies shots, all of these kind of things. And so, like, it all kind of culminates into that neglect. And I feel like there's a lot of like masculine rage in this book coming and being directed at like women and children happening in it. And I feel like almost, if you want to look at it symbolically, Cujo could represent that blind rage that won't stop until it kills itself and everything around it. I don't know. But and I think that there's so much of, you know, I just wanted to scream through, you know, to the characters and stuff, because, like, just, you know, pick up the phone. Like, I think that what this drill, it was almost like an after-school special, like PSA, right? To say, like, care enough to just, what's it gonna hurt? Well,
what's it gonna hurt to just say something? Communicate. Like, okay, so yeah, your marriage is on the rocks. You just assume, oh, I'm sure she's okay, whatever.
But your marriage is on the rocks because you don't communicate.
What's it gonna
And now
hurt?
you're gonna have all this issue because you don't communicate.
And then if the local sheriff, like,
Mhm.
do your job, go and check this out, right?
Yeah.
Unfortunately,
Right.
eventually he does, but, right? But,
Yeah, but like, if you checked it out earlier,
Yes.
it wouldn't have been this bad, and again, it's like that idea of like putting off stuff, like, I'll take care of that later, and it's like, there may not be a later.
yeah, and to your point about the wife, that domestic abuse,
Mm-hmm.
and her wanting to just be like, oh, no, let's not bother him, he's gonna get mad, like, we,
Mhm.
let's not, and then, and then you have poor Cujo's owner, basically, the boy,
Yeah.
the other boy,
Yeah,
and I almost wished, after reading this, to see a follow-up Stephen King novel about that kid.
yeah, because how bad would you feel?
Do you feel, because in the
This
end of
is
the
your
novel,
dog,
yeah,
and your dog is dead, your dog has like killed people.
yeah.
Like just your whole would you ever want a pet again? Like that's devastating.
And almost, it's very interesting at the end, because the boy then gets a new dog, right?
Yeah.
And
but
it's like oblivious, it's just like happy, and in a way,
Mm-hmm.
to me, that said, like, okay, this monster, who was a good dog,
Yeah.
turned bad
Mhm.
because of whatever, medically or supernaturally or a combination.
Yeah.
But then it wasn't the boy's fault, and there's oftentimes so much blame
Yeah. Yeah.
and civil cases against family members who didn't have anything really directly to do with their,
Mm-hmm.
child or their pet or anything like that, so.
Oh, I do feel like that might be a commentary on like nature versus nurture almost, and like how maybe you can't control every little thing that happens, and how they, sometimes bad things just happen, and sometimes otherwise good people or dogs can go bad for one reason or another, and maybe the lesson is about like taking responsibility
Yeah.
for that, and trying to mitigate potential harm instead of waiting until the harm is like all over your front yard.
Yeah. Oh gosh. Too soon. No. Yeah. Well, and right. And I think we need to get into the heart of what makes this a horror novel
Mhm.
and a monster. Why we're talking about it at Monsterama.
Oh yeah.
Because so after all of this happens, the chain of events that happen to put
The series of unfortunate events.
seriously.
Very unfortunate events.
I don't have the right alliterative title like all those books were, the
I don't
that
either.
would start with a P for Pinto. The perilous Pinto.
The perilous Pinto. There we go.
But we get to that point, and
Mhm.
and they planned. They
Mhm.
brought snacks.
Yeah. There's all this stuff.
She kept pushing the note on this bad car,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
which brilliantly also too, though, yeah, sure, there were a lot on the road at the time of the writing and so forth, but it almost kind of like, to me, was like, oh, well, we know the maintenance history and
Yeah.
problems with the Pinto. It's almost,
Yeah. For anyone who doesn't know, like the Pinto was notoriously like a very bad, dangerous car. It was like a death trap machine. Like if it was hit in the back, like if someone got in an accident and they rear-ended you, it had a high chance of exploding. So, not a safe vehicle, and despite the fact that it's like, portrayed as like this good parent and all this stuff, they still have this death trap car, and then the car becomes an actual death trap.
yes.
And so it's like, I know Stephen King must have been aware of this. Like,
Yeah.
there's no way he wasn't. And so, like, to choose that particular vehicle in and of itself is just, it's darkly hilarious.
It really is. It really is. And so they, they're stuck in this, in the mechanic's
In his
yard outside of his bar.
Yeah, just in his like driveway.
Driveway, right.
It's like, I think they had like a dirt driveway in there or something like that, but.
But
Yeah.
to your point, brilliant writing that you don't see all that often in from the mind of a crazy animal.
That's the thing that I think made it perfect for me to read as a kid, because I had read things like Call of the Wild and stuff like that are also from a dog's point of view. And so this was like that taken to a whole other extreme. Like if Call of the Wild had happened, except he got rabies and horrible, and it just becomes worse and worse. But I mean, I think like you're in Cujo's head and you're sympathizing. Like Cujo's not just like an angry dog, he's a character. And we like our monsters to have some kind of purpose, and tragic backstory in a monster is like perfection. I mean, Frankenstein's monster has got that in spades, and that's a classic.
Yeah.
Creature from the Black Lagoon. I mean, just wants love.
Right?
It's just a sad.
And finally did with The Shape of Water, right?
Yeah, exactly. It took a long time.
Took a long time.
Got it.
Very long time. Right, so, but I loved it. I thought it, like, you get into the psychology of this dog and wondering why its owners would do this to it. And
because it has no control over anything that happens to it.
And then as it started, its vision, Cujo's vision kind of gets blurred, and just you see this slow decline, or maybe kind of even quick decline, really, in its perception of reality.
And it doesn't understand, like when they're beating up and hitting the cardboard.
Right.
And
why would it do
he
this?
doesn't know what that sound is anymore, because sound has become such a like anger-inducing thing, and he just is like, I'm gonna attack it until it stops making the sound.
Yeah.
So they don't realize they're triggering like a major hellstorm of pain, a world of pain.
It was crazy. It really was. So why do you think? No, okay. I get it. There are a lot of people, and I've had this debate with a lot of people over the years about what are you willing to do to survive?
Oh boy.
Or what are you willing to do to protect your loved one, right? Especially a child. And to me, I thought, and not everyone is mentally and emotionally equal in that regard, right?
Oh yeah.
And certainly not
there's
physically.
so many different like variables that happen here. And also like what can you do physically? Like what do you have at your disposal? I just got done watching A Quiet Place too, so I'm just like that idea of what people are willing to do to protect their kids is like kind of
fresh.
Right there.
And bless her heart, I envision, was her name Donna? The main character's name?
I think so.
Vic and,
I want to say
but the mother, I envision her as, reasonably petite, average. She's
the standard Stephen King female protagonist. She's blonde and she's petite and she's like stands up for herself, but maybe gets herself in over her head. Like she's basically Wendy from The Shining.
Right. Yes.
It's just the standard early King female.
Not Dolores Claiborne.
Well, that was later Stephen King.
Right.
We're talking early Stephen King.
Dolores Claiborne, I think, would have.
Yeah, I mean,
Carrie
doesn't count either, because she's not really a protagonist. I mean, she's your protagonist, but she's also the antagonist.
That's very true.
Though I will say that now that I think about it, Carrie and Cujo have a lot in common, because they're both in the point of view of the monster slowly losing control of themselves and lashing out at other people. Hadn't thought about that.
And as a result of many layers
of things.
Of things assaulting it.
Yeah.
In different ways, whether it's neglect or abuse,
all of these.
Mental, every type of, all accounts, right?
Yeah. I hadn't thought about that before.
I hadn't either. That's good.
I wonder how much that, like, is something that Stephen King himself, like, observed. Because I know that he said with Carrie, he observed, like, many people in were subjected to different
Yeah.
types of things like Carrie was, and he just sort of conglomerated that together, and then got Tabitha's influence insight into it, since he was writing a female perspective. But I do feel like Cujo has some of that rage of, you know, the neglected or abused individual lashing out and maybe hurting everyone instead of just the people that hurt them.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting.
It is interesting, and you hear Stephen King tell about how he came up with the idea for Cujo.
Mm-hmm.
So he says that and I think around 77, I think it was what he went to. He was looking for a mechanic to fix his motorcycle, and he went and he had heard about this guy,
Mm-hmm.
and so he went to his house, kind of out in the country, far away, whatever. But he was, you know, he could fix it. And it wasn't gonna like rip him off like a city mechanic might. So it's kind of more of a shade tree mechanic. And they've been really good with motorcycles apparently. Mm-hmm. So he took his motorcycle over there, and when he got there, this guy had a dog that came out, and it was a Saint Bernard, and came out and kind of growled at him or something. And the owner said, oh, he's really normally a good dog. He doesn't normally do that sort of a thing. Mm-hmm. And that stuck with him. That this dog, you know, when he went there to get his motorcycle fixed, he had this encounter with him, and what if a dog went bad, you know, kind of thing. That was normally a good dog, and I thought that was a kind of reasonably innocuous. I mean, he got out of it. It was, you know.
Well, yeah, but it's like that kind of thing, like sticks in a creator's head and just kind of marinates there for a little while. That's definitely That's really interesting. I mean, it just kind of, that idea, first of all, it's like an isolated place. So it's got that, I mean, it's not Hills Have Eyes level, but it's you know, you do have that feeling of like, I'm off in an isolated location. This is before cell phones were ubiquitous, or GPS, so not everyone's going to be able to easily find you.
Right.
So
yeah, what
serial killer, what are you going to do? If Leatherface walks out, good luck. You know.
Yeah, all the what ifs.
Yeah. And I think for like the person who's like either paranoid or just maybe like on high alert, whichever word you prefer, I think that would definitely be like a trigger thing that would make you go, okay, so what could be wrong with this dog? Why would a dog be acting more aggressive than usual? I mean, rabies is the first thing you would think of, so yeah, that.
And not so long ago, when they didn't have cell phones at their, you know, or a car phone or any way, you know, to communicate, to get help.
Yeah.
And so I thought it was fascinating how long she took, you know, like hoping, okay, surely a car is going to drive by. Oh well, no, then that's not going to happen. Oh, surely the mailman's going to deliver. Oh, then no, it doesn't. Surely, you know, these things are going to happen, and then you kind of keep waiting and waiting instead, you know, but maybe because this dog is so clearly
it's clearly sick by that.
Sick.
Like
and harassing, you know, on the car, by the door every time you make any attempt.
Yeah. And it's just I think that like I don't know, like what could she have done differently? Like if this was like a survival game, like what would you what would you do?
Right.
Like I mean, she's in a Pinto. She doesn't have a whole lot of space to move around in. You know, she's out in the bright sunlight, so the heat. I think the heat is his descriptions of the blazing heat inside that car are some of my favorite ones, because like living in the South, like you know exactly how that is, and the slow dehydration and the toll that it takes just being in that car when you can't even like fully roll the windows down or anything, because something will kill you.
Right. You have to crack it just enough to be able to get some airflow through and be bearable, but you can't let this rabid dog in, this monster, huge dog, you know.
Good for her, they weren't automatic windows though.
Right.
You know, you have to turn the If she could get the car out, she wouldn't be there.
Right, exactly. And it was crazy. But she does eventually get up, running out of options.
Yeah.
Maybe should have acted sooner,
Yeah,
whatever.
I think that's totally a debate thing.
It really is.
Totally think, because on the one hand, by waiting, she's assuming that the mailman's gonna be bait. So she's like, well, let's let him get attacked. That's cool.
Yeah.
It's so again, she's just passing the buck
True.
on to somebody else.
And hoping that, her white knight might save her. Someone's gonna figure it out, and someone's gonna, her husband's gonna come and save them. And she holds on to that for several chapters.
Mm-hmm.
But then she realizes, I think she has to take some action to save her child.
She has a strong level of dependency.
Yeah.
Yeah, again, she's very windy Torrance, but she has that level of dependency where she thinks that, she thinks some guy is gonna come save her.
Yeah.
And by the time she finally acts to save herself, and we don't know how, she gets bit at one point.
She gets bit on the leg, right, when
So-
she's trying to get back in, but doesn't she thinks, okay, I'm gonna take the clothes or something to protect herself, like her arm or something, maybe in case he goes to bite her or something.
Yeah. But it's by then she's infected with rage.
She wants to get the baseball bat that
Yeah.
she finally sees. So, okay, she sees a weapon. There's nothing in the car.
Yeah.
And again, they teach us nowadays, right? Like if you're in some situation, like even tear the mirror, the rear view mirror off to be able to use to break yourself out of the car if you're going underwater, or things like. But not everybody is MacGyver and is going to think in that to be prepared.
No, but I don't know. If I was sitting in a car for that many hours, I'd probably start thinking about what I can use.
Yeah.
Can I pull the cloth off the roof and use that to make bandages or something?
Something.
Or sunshades. I don't know. Something.
Yeah. You can't really try and start a fire in the car or anything.
No. You could start a fire and put it in the dog's face, though. That would be unfair.
Yeah. If somehow you could get to even some of the gasoline or something to be able to then
just blow the car up. Make a bomb.
I was gonna say to be able to like a Molotov cocktail or something to go and throw it to some of the brush to start. But then that's dangerous yourself as well.
But we're also woulda, shoulda, coulda. At the end, this is probably a fairly realistic example of how a person would realistically react, right?
Yes.
Waiting for someone else to help them.
Which is what makes it so scary.
And
infuriating because like I said, I think this is such a lesson in don't not whitewash, but don't coddle your children and really anyone about the real things. There are real pedophiles out there, right? So
protect yourself. Let them know how to protect themselves.
Yeah. So and that's beautiful, right? He starts out and then the boy has these monster words because he sees this monster in the closet. And the novel was even prefaced with talking about Frank Dodd, right? The serial killer.
I love that so much.
From
it's so creepy.
The Dead Zone, right? And I think he's mentioned in some other one, maybe Needful Things too.
All that Stephen King universe.
Yeah. And so when I was reading, I made this note in my phone when you're going through the monster words, you have no business here. And I wrote a note saying, I really hope there's a callback at the climax where little Tad tries to use the monster words on Cujo, and he never really did that, but she did say, she at one point, right, did she say she wished the monster words would work?
Yeah. But again, what she's done is they've taught their kid that monsters don't exist.
But yet
here's a monster.
But yet, what
do you do?
Right. They've given him this power of oh look, we're gonna write out this hokey little magic spell, and we're gonna put it on the wall by your bed, and then anytime you need, you know, because Tad believed like, oh, Daddy is the only one that can protect me from the monster in the closet.
The monster in the closet looked a lot like Cujo too, which is really interesting.
But,
like
so,
that premonition stuff.
that takes me to what I wanted to ask you about next was, what was up with that? What was up with was there really a monster in the closet? Because we saw even when the dad finally came home, and he went to check there too, and didn't like the chair like go fall over on some books or something on its own, and he had the dream or the premonition. There were multiple like dreams about that like, so is that maybe some shine?
That's what I was thinking. I think it could be, I think it's that, and I also think it gets back to that idea of like, this is fated to happen. Like, I don't know, like in Greek tragedies where someone has like visions of like, this bad thing is gonna happen, and there's all these bad premonitions, but you can't do anything about it because this is gonna happen anyway. Like you have to, like at some point, I mean, you don't have any control over what kind of bad stuff happens. And the essence of it is that when Tad said there was a monster, they didn't believe him. And then they have to come face to face with monsters. It's not just Cujo, it's also her, like, the dude she was messing around with that comes and destroys, like, trashes the house. The mechanic himself who's abusive to his wife, like, there are monsters. So they lied to their kid. I mean, we find out there's a serial killer in the very beginning. I mean, that's a monster. So, I mean, they're outright lying. And it's not a benign lie. But you're telling your kid that if you say these words, the monster won't bother you. But that's not true. Like, that's not going to make a rabid dog go away. That's not going to make a serial killer not attack you. That's not going to make a pedophile not prey on children.
Right. Well, I mean, like I don't have any kids yet. I hope one day my wife and I will have kids, and this I was even. She kind of laughed at how like personal I got with this because I was like so mad. I was so upset like about like this it's such bad parenting in so many ways, and so many other people like they say it takes a village, and so this community of people that could all do better to take care of each other, and they failed, and you know that we worry about some of now where people are they don't know their neighbors as well, they don't really communicate or collaborate with their local communities as much as they used to. You know, but this showed even when you do know all these people.
Yeah, just because you know people doesn't mean that they'll put their neck on the line for you. And it's it kind of does have it does have a lot to say about like be realistic and honest and don't dismiss your kids, because I don't know, I was reading you mentioned pedos, and I was reading about the findings they found about the Catholic Church in France recently, and how they found like so many instances that had been covered up. And I mean, how many of those kids tried to talk to their parents, and their parents told them that, you know, like, and I'm like generation, not saying that happens all the time, but it's like, I mean, if you're not going to listen to your kids and they talk about like something like a monster, what they might think is a monster, well, your definition of monster might be different from their definition. So asking them to clarify things is probably important. I don't know.
And that's a recurring trope in a lot of horror is no, adults don't listen to children.
Yes.
They don't believe children, and that's why, you know, now, this written in the 70s, and the same thing, it's like so
listen to your kids.
Important. Listen to your
communicate with your partner and your children.
It could be serious. Don't brush it off.
You don't know.
Yeah.
It could be like there's a creepy person that stares at me from the closet, and it could be that there's like a freaking like squatter hiding in your attic that creeps out and comes out and stares. You don't know. I mean, that happens sometimes. So,
Well, we've only got about maybe 5 minutes left here, and I know you want to talk about the ending of the novel. And I think I know, I think I know particularly what. So we get to the end. She does finally build up the strength to be able to go and attack him with the bat.
yeah.
Even though she's been bitten and has been there basically 2 days in the car in all this heat and overnight and not getting much sleep and everything. So then she manages to.
Yeah, and I think it's important that she's bitten at that point, because it's like she's taken some of the rage from the monster into herself, and that's the only way she can find strength is in that. She has to become monstrous in her own way in order to actually defeat it, because if she's just going to be passive and a victim, she's not going to be able to get anywhere. But she pays for that too, because she waited so long.
And that's the big difference from the novel and the movie, is that Tad dies.
Yes. What did you think about the fact that they chose that in the movie versus the book?
That's what I read, was that they thought that it was too dark. It was too sad. They needed a triumphant ending, of, victory over the monster. Yeah. Kind of Hollywood ending.
What did you think?
Well, because I understand why they would do that for the movie, and it in a way it can. I didn't think the way that in the movie it really served its purpose. If you made a movie version of the book with all that we've just been talking about, and she turned a page and was able to then now realize the error of her ways and come out victorious through her actions, then maybe it would be a good lesson of, oh, it would have been too late, but you made some good decisions.
Yeah, but I feel like by having Tad live at the end, I feel like in the movie they sort of take the teeth out of it, because that's part of the reality in our world that we live in, which King's trying to replicate here, is that sometimes the monsters win. And I forget which book he has, but that's something that he has a character say a few times, is sometimes the monsters win, and I can't remember where it was, maybe it's It or something like that. But I think about that with Cujo in the movie version, because it's very important that, there's multiple monsters in this, and she has to overcome her fear, but she waits forever, and by the time she's able to actually do it, Cujo's weaker, so she might have been able to defeat him easier. But, Tad dying is kind of important, because, I don't know, it just feels like it takes away the threat. Like, I think of spoilers for The Mist. But The Mist, I feel like, did a lot better with that, because they weren't afraid to go that route, and then the ending just hits home so much harder, because they've been through so much, and he's literally just shot his child, and they even have the kid wake up briefly to see it happen. So, and then he gets out, and then everything's fine. Just devastating.
Well, I was not ready when she finds out that the police get there. Of course, Cujo kills the cop, and then finally the ambulances and stuff come, and the husband and so forth. But at that point, they're treating her wounds, and they're first to see, okay, what happened here. But she doesn't even know that Tad died.
Yeah, and she has no idea.
She has to find that out secondhand, and then she herself goes rabid.
Yeah.
And he wrote even the EMT, the paramedic, had to go to the hospital because she bit him.
Yeah.
And he had to go for rabies treatment from her, and I was not prepared for that.
I liked that.
I loved it, but I was shocked.
The monstrousness just carries on, and it's this idea of her trigger thing was this, and that's, I don't know, it just.
I would have loved to see that on the screen, to see this she's been through so much already, and then she kills this monster that's been tormenting them, and then finds out it was for nothing. You know, she didn't wind up protecting her son, and then she just has to see him and is even fighting off, and now she is gone crazy, just like Cujo.
She is now the Cujo of the situation, but she gets more treatment. And is it because she's a person and Cujo killed a bunch of people? And I don't know, like, but that idea of like monstrousness passing around. There's an old Vincent Price movie called Diary of a Madman that I love. And it's this idea. It's based on a Camus story about an evil entity that can possess people and make them do horrible things. And the idea that evil like moves on to another host. It's that idea of like evil like having a presence and like moving into a body and then moving on to the next person and over again. It's kind of like Cujo transferred that to her, and it'll just keep going. And what's the EMT gonna do?
It follows, you know, kind of a little bit. And that's one of the ongoing mysteries about it. Did Frank Dodd, the spirit, kind of like in Child's Play or something? But that was Clive Barker, I think, right?
Yeah.
But you know, there something similar to that, or like a Pennywise, that there's this
like
evil, malevolent spirit that is going around and maybe caused Frank Dodd to be doing the things that he did. But did the spirit of Frank Dodd inhabit Cujo? And possess him in a way, or the bat that bit him, or what you know? And that's kind of left, you know, unexplained.
Because there is a supernatural element to it, and we don't know. And I think that's what makes this such a good story. Because it was just like dog goes rabid, kills a bunch of people, gets killed. It wouldn't be like as much of a story that like resonates. But I think like when you say Cujo, everyone knows, oh, rabid dog. Like even people who've never like watched the movie or read the book know that like Cujo is shorthand for rabid dog. They're like, oh, don't go Cujo.
And I'm glad you said that, because so I read why he was named Cujo is named after the Symbionese Liberation Army, the SLA, that kidnapped Patty Hearst.
That's awesome.
And one of the leaders was named something like Kojo, and so he just kind of made it a variation of that, Cujo. And then when you get to the very end and Cujo's little boy gets a new dog, and he's like, what am I going to name it? I'm going to name it like Willie or something. And it's so oblivious that you just move on. It's interesting, like, you know, a rose by any other name, you know, kind of thing. Like, so it just sealed the deal for me that, like, it doesn't matter, you know, that this was just a one-off bad dog that had bad situations happen to it.
Lots and lots of bad situations. Like, was the part of the bad situation caused by the abusive dad, and like that kind of, and now that the kid's away from that,
but it
will
wasn't.
This dog be fine? Like, I don't know. Like, the culmination of wickedness in the town just decided to lash out.
Well, I loved it. This was one of the most affecting novels that I've read in a long, long time, and it was a pleasure to talk to you about it here. So before we go, tell everybody where they can find you on social media or anything else.
You can find me at morbidsmile.com. I'm also on Etsy. I'm on Instagram at morbid_smile. I'm on Facebook. Go check out my art, check out my writing, and give me a follow. I'm Kelly M. Frank.
And I am Kyle Mitchell. You can find my poetry. I have 2 books of poetry. You can just search for Kyle Mitchell online. You can find my 2 books. And on social media, at Poet Kyle. So thanks for watching our discussion of Cujo here at Monsterama 2021. Thank you.
Yep.